discussing topic on gut microbiota. This is again more of a concept class, but it is asked very commonly in theory exam. Gut microbiota, there will be the simple question like that, and we have to write something in 10 marks. So that is something important. Plus, in a way, it is very important when it comes to the understanding a disease, because nowadays most of the things, including your cardiovascular disease, immunological disease, endocrine disease, everything at the end is like centered at the gut. That thing starts there, and after that, immunity and all things gets bad. Okay. So before I start discussing, can I have one confirmation whether it's audible? It's audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Fine. So this chapter, as we told, very important in theory exam. If it comes, we have to write at least 2 or 3 pages. But we will try to understand what they are. Are they really friend or foe, and how actually it helps in developing disease, or what is its role? Okay. So starting the discussion here, this is by the Hippocrates. There's all disease begins in the gut, that sits in the bowels, and bad digestion is the root of all evil. Okay. So from very old time, it is known that thing starts here. Okay. But now we are understanding how actually it starts and how actually it extrapolates to the system. So the outline of presentation is we will be seeing an overview of the gut microbiome. Who are they? Where are they? How do they evolve? And how they maintain their life at the gut. Survival without overgrowth. Microbiota in health, why they are there, why they are helpful, what is their physiological role, and microbiota in disease. This is the association there. Actually, if you take screenshot of this, this is your short note ready. You are the going to cover this short note in 3 parts. What is the gut microbiota? What is their physiological role? And which are the diseases where it is implicated? These are the three major headings you are going to write your short note. So we'll try to just understand so your short note becomes easy for you, that we don't have to write so many wrong things rather than just writing few wrong things, right? So role of probiotics, if what for which we will discuss. Yeah, who are they? Okay, so they are more of strict anaerobe than the facultative anaerobe and aerobe. So anaerobes are more common than facultative anaerobe and aerobe, and the majority of gut microbiota belongs to two of the family, either the bacteroides or the Firmicutes, more than Proteo, Varico, Actino, Fuso, Cyno. Okay, there are 35,000 bacterial species there. I'm not going to remember them everything, but at least few. Factoroids, Firmicutes, or the Proteo, Varico, whatever you want to remember, at least remember few. Even if you don't want to remember that, at least remember they are more of anaerobe than the facultative anaerobe and aerobe. Okay, so now we know who are they. Okay, now next thing comes, where are they and how do they evolve? Just 1 second. Yeah. So they are everywhere. Proximal GI tract to distal GI tract, they are everywhere. And if you really see that number increases and diversity increases as we go down. In stomach, the ratio is 10 raised to 1 with composition of lactobacillus, Veillonella or Helicobacter. From duodenum 10 raised to 3, jejunum 10 raised to 4, ileum 10 raised to 7, colon is the highest, which is 10 raised to 12. And we know that it also varies in the diversity as we go down. Okay, so this is what first we can tell. Who are they? Now we are telling where are they, and we are telling we go proximal to distal. The number keep increasing, the variation keep increasing. So this is the one thing we establish here. Next thing comes, if you go layer to layer, like when you are at the epithelial surface and mucosal layer, they are little less, but when you go into the lumen, there are lot. And we also know that they are our commensals, they are not part of our life. So I don't want them much at the mucosa and epithelial, or certainly I don't want them at the muscularis mucosa or the submucosal level. So this is very few here. This is a really lot here. So the gut lumens are not empty. It is filled with so much of this bacteria there. And this is what it tells. If you imagine the gut in two parts, one is longitudinal imagination from the proximal to distal. As we go further, the number increases and variation increases. And when you imagine the gut and the transverse section from lumen to the adventitia, in lumen they are maximum compared to the mucosa and all. Okay, so this is what we established. Who are they and where they are? Now the next question we are addressing, how they evolve. At what point of life I have this all the bacteria in my body? So it is a birth to 1 year, increasing number, increasing in diversity. So this is the point. Actually, all the susceptibilities actually getting decided that how much variation in the gut microbiota a kid or the child will have or the infant will have. It gets influenced with the maternal colonization, the diet, environmental exposure, and antimicrobial therapies during the infancy or neonate. This all will impact the development or the diversity and the number of gut microbiota. So if infancy do not go well, in future chances of diseases including cardiovascular, obesity, rheumatological disease, allergy, everything increases. So sometimes we keep telling that partner that kid had initial problems. So in future the chances is high. So that looks okay. Why it will be high? So now if you start asking question why, maybe your answer resides in the gut, that this was decided at that point and this got varied. That's why these things are bad. So it is important what the mother eats, what kid gets, what is the environmental exposure of kid, and what are the antimicrobial therapy received there. So we have seen many practice in the so-called influence society or what we say the middle to higher socioeconomical class. A subtle fever, subtle rhinitis, they give antibiotic to kids, right? So that is something a very common practice which is there nowadays. But actually, we are screwing kids' life by giving that antibiotic when it is not necessary. So it is very important concept to understand here that it can actually have a detrimental effect. So at after that point, they are maintained and composition evolves continuously. Okay, the variation can evolve, but numbers are mostly decided that how many microbiome a person is going to have at that point. Okay. So the first year of life is actually very important to determine how we are going to go further. So in gut microbiota short note, you have written or you have actually learned who are they, where are they, and how they evolve. Okay. So this is the headings you can write that can help you. Now this is again image from Harrison that actually at different side of the body they are different. Now initially we talk or we started short note as a gut microbiota, and then someone told you have too much narrow vision or the tunnel vision. They are everywhere then. Okay, they are there in the gut, they are there in the skin, they are there in the dam, all mucosa possible. So as such it is a microbiota, but what we are concerned is the gut microbiota more. Why? Because the lymphoid tissue are richest at the gut. That's why that interactions are maximum at the gut. That's why the topic heading of the short note comes is the gut microbiota. But otherwise, they are ubiquitous. They are everywhere in skin. They are in the nasal mucosa. They are in the respiratory mucosa. They are there in oral cavity. And already everyone reads that rheumatoid arthritis and P. gingivalis has some correlation, or periodontitis and RA has some correlation. What we are talking, a gut microbiome or the a microbiome and the autoimmune disease. So already we know some links are there, right? So this tells from Harrison that this is the distribution that depending on the site, this will be differing, whether they are gut, their oral cavity, buccal mucosa, nose, skin, vaginal tissue, or the GI and stool. All it varies in the composition. So now the question comes, how do they survive? Tolerance at the gut mucosa, what can be the possible mechanism? Now this is very important point, right? It is not something that I grew from age 0 or my day 1 of life to right now 31 years. With me, these people also grew, they carried with me. Okay. So how did they survive where actually they are foreign to me? Okay. As such, we know they are old friends. Okay. So they are not as such foreign. They evolve with us when we think evolution is a bigger part. But now we have to think more scientifically. How did they survive? It's not something I didn't attack on them. So what were the mechanism there? So physical separation of bacterial and host cell. Okay, it is something we tell thoda dur raho, right? So that's how do we do that? So that is a mucus layer overlying the colonic mucosa is effectively divided into two tiers. The bottom is devoid of bacteria and the more dynamic top tier being permeated by the members of the gut microbiota. Okay, So they stay with us, but little away. Okay, they are in the lumen. They are at the mucosal superficial layer. No, but you do not touch me. Okay, so that is the mucosa which separates and which allow them to stay there. If you are not interfering, it's okay. You can stay there. That's the first physical separation we did to allow them to grow with us. What is the next step we did? The modification of antigenic moieties of the microbiota to render them less immunological. Okay, so why they are foreign to us? Because they contain that lipopolysaccharide which can stimulate TLR4 and all. So whatever gut tissue did, they dephosphorylated the LPS. Now it is okay, stay there. The antigenic modification we did. Second point, the intestinal cells also acquire the tolerance to the endotoxin through the down regulation of IRAK1. Forget that IRAK1, TLR4 and all. But what it tells, first was the physical separation, second was the immune tolerance or the immune modification at the local level. We suppress the antigenic power of microbiome, and we suppressed our mechanism to act to that. So it is something, it's okay if you are away. I am not going to attack on you. Okay, that is the concept which is helping, that the gut microbiome is staying there and we are not attacking on that. The third is the modulation of the localized host immune response toward tolerance. I know it is too much written, but at the end, if you see, it is the intestinal mucosa dendritic cells are actually goes to the upregulation of the Treg cell and Th2 rather than the Th1 and all. Okay, so that tells me one thing what we discussed in the hygiene hypothesis. Okay, this gut microbiota is actually creating a regulatory milieu at the gut. When regulatory milieu is there, they can stay there. Okay, so at the end of this slide, what we understood, first we learned that gut microbiota, who are they, where are they, and how do they evolve. Then the question came, okay, these people are there for since the birth of a kid to the age where they live. How did they survive there? They are foreign, but how did they survive there? First, they were kept separated, which was the physical barrier of mucosa. Second point, at that level, their antigenic weapons were down regulated, which was the dephosphorylation of the LPS and the other modification. Third part, what body did at the gut level. Okay, even if they come in contact, do not attack. Go in the regulatory form. So that is the mechanism. This gut microbiota stayed with us. Now see, it is kind of a friendship which is being maintained in a homeostasis to both. I am allowing them to stay there, but at the same time they are returning me more and more regulatory favors. Okay, they are giving me more and more regulatory upregulation of the immunity, means less and less autoimmune disease. So this is how it is helping us to maintain the regulatory milieu at the point of gut. Okay, so this is how they are surviving at the gut, how they do not overgrow. Okay, this is the important point to consider. If we pamper someone too much or if we take care of too much, they will overgrow and they will just bypass us and the things will go bad in life. So we need a control. So what is the control at the gut level? IgA, secretory IgA, which is secreted from that. If you overgrow, it will go up and kill you. Okay, so that's the first control we put on the gut microbiota high. So there is a plasma cell at the gut which secretes the secretory IgA. Second thing, we have certain killers also, which is antimicrobial peptide, which also kills them to overgrow at the gut. Okay, so just remember the highlighted part. It will help you to build up your answer. So, okay, if we will go now this microbiota in health or the physiology. Before that, we just complete the summary what we discussed till now. That okay, go fast, man. Yeah. Who are they? They are anaerobe, more than facultative anaerobes and the aerobes. And the numbers are around 35,000 bacterial species. Number is too much. Where are they? They are everywhere in the gut, proximal to distal. More distal you go, increase in number, increase diversity. Epithelium to this, if you see epithelial surface mucous layer, they are less, but in lumen they are too much. So if really someone wants to see the composition of gut microbiota, what is the actual ideal sample of the body? The feces. Okay, so stool is the sample where we actually assess for the diversity of this microbiota. And how they evolve, birth to 1 year is the time that they evolve. The numbers are getting fixed, but composition keeps getting evaluated, right? Like we start smoking at 18, so it might affect that gut microbiota. We start drinking at some point. So this all factors which keep coming that will affect the gut microbiota, and then the disease susceptibility keeps changing. So this is the different distribution, and how did they survive? These are the physical or the mechanism of the mucosal cells, the modification we do for them, and the upregulation of Treg, and how they do not ever grow because we keep them under control with secretory IgA by plasma cell and antimicrobial peptide. Now the question comes, what immunomodulation is achieved by this gut microbiota? So evidence comes from the germ-free animal models. These are not new things for us. At least we have understood the hygiene hypothesis that when they are germ-free, there is abnormal number of immune cell type and product and deficit in lymphoid structure, local and systemic, hypoplastic Peyer's patch and decreased number of isolated lymphoid follicle and decreased number of secretory plasma cell, poorly formed lymph node in spleen. This all tells if there are no bacteria inside, if there are no bacteria inside an animal model, the immune system do not develop. So that is telling me whatever I am protected in my life and I am living till now, it is not just my immune system. It is my immune system which got developed with help of my friends lying in my gut. Okay, so that is the first evidence, experimental evidence which tells the role of gut microbiota is there in developing the immune system. So at initial part, the patient or the kid has developed, the infant has received too much of antibiotic, environment is not good. In future, immune system related problem is going to be high because the development of the immune system won't be that great. So mucosal and systemic immunity maturation. So whenever, like we will just go in the top part, lack of T cell expansion in germ-free animals. Various lactobacillus species have been shown to differentially regulate dendritic cell with consequent influence on the Th1, Th2, Th3 cytokine and NK cells, which somehow it regulates that part. Bacteroids are required for the differentiation of Th17 cells, and peptidoglycan gram-negative bacteria, if you see, they are also influencing this. So as such, it is telling that germ-free animals were there somewhere where the patient did not develop much of the lymphoid system or the immune system. Second point, they observed with a peculiar few bacteria, there was a problem in the development of the adaptive arms of the immunity. And specifically, once if you want to notice, the bacteriotoids are something which is required for the differentiation of the inflammatory Th17 cells. So if that burden of bacteriotoids goes high, the Th17 burden goes high. And can you remember a single or two or three diseases which are Th17 dependent? Yes, it is rheumatoid arthritis, it is psoriatic arthritis, which are Th17 dependent disease. So that tells me, okay, that can go wrong and that can give a false thing. Even when we discuss multiple sclerosis pathogenesis, the Th17 axis was coming in picture. So that tells that everything is in the gut. We just should start understanding what exactly it is. And unfortunately, we do not know what exactly it is because there are 35,000 species. When I will understand all that part. Okay. So it protects us against infection. So have you realized this part during your practice that gut microbiota protects us against infection? Yes, when we give antibiotics to our patient, they become more susceptible to Clostridium difficile infection. So that fact we already have realized in our life. So how does that happen? How the presence of gut microbiota prevents the further infection? Now, at this point, I think it is time someone asked me also that actually when we get infection, suppose if you remember the streptococcus infection and the rheumatic fever, it is a more chance of molecular mimicry. Even the previous chapter, I was discussing the same part that more molecular mimicry, more autoimmunity. Now we are talking totally different concept to us that more infection, less autoimmunity, right? It is something a confusing link what we are getting. But now this is the point we clear the things that there are a lot of organisms or lot of microbiomes existing in the world. They are dividing in the certain parts. Some are commensals and some are pathobiomes and some are pathogenic bacteria. Now, what is commensals? They are friends. They stay with us. They do not cause much of trouble. What is pathobiont? Pathobiont is like very odd people who looks like friends, but when they get the milieu of inflammation, they behave like pathogenic bacteria. And what are pathogenic bacteria? They are true enemies. Streptococcus or the enteric and all, they are true enemies. They show that they are enemies. So what is actual problem in life? See, friends are friends, enemies are enemies. It's in between people who screw our life. That's a pathobiont. So that's what happens at the autoimmunity level also, the gut disturbance level also, that whenever our gut homeostasis is disturbed, this pathobiont becomes pathogenic, and that's how the infection starts taking place. So I think that doubt has been addressed now, that all the bacteria are not friends, all are not enemy, and some are actually screwing people. They are pathobiont, which actually makes everything different in life. So what bacteria do? The physical barriers to the incoming pathogen by competitive exclusion, right? They don't allow them to come inside. So there are so many commensals which do not allow the pathogenic bacteria, because they will be occupying attachment site, they will be consumption of the nutritional source and production of the antimicrobial substance, all will be encouraged by them. So whatever new things comes, it will be taken care. Otherwise, imagine your life. We eat every day outside food, everything we do, still we are all fine. Why we are fine? Because these friends are helping us. We are taking everyday foreign products inside our body, still we are fine, because this is the first mechanism which comes in the picture. Stimulation of various antimicrobial peptide like defensin, cathelicidin, C-type, lectin, or whatever numbers we say. The short chain fatty acid and lithocholic acid in the gut. Okay, now these short chain fatty acids are not easy products. If there is gut bacteria, that only can convert the long chain fatty acid to short chain fatty acid. So when these short chain fatty acids are converted, they will again produce more and more antimicrobial peptide, and that will all lead to the protection against the new infection. It converts antimicrobial peptide to active form, and lactobacillus and all bacteria prevents listeria infection. Lactobacillus decrease the colonization by E. coli, and this SFB on ileal mucosa, they exclude the Salmonella enteritidis from its attachment site. So it all tells that initially we understood who are they, where are they, how they evolve, how they stay for with us in life, and then the concept came how actually they do the help. The first thing their help was, they help to develop our lymphoid and the immune system, because in a specific pathogen free or the germ free environment, they found the pair patches were not good, the lymphoid tissues were not good, means they are part of developing immune system. Second point, they protect against infection by all this mechanism what we have told. The first mechanism is the providing a competition. Second mechanism is stimulating the antimicrobial peptide. Now the question comes, it's the antimicrobial peptide. Doesn't it attack friends? No, it does not attack friends, because they are kept little away. Okay, and they are modified. So they start staying with us together. It does not get on the surface there. It is just the pathobiont or the pathogenic bacteria which gets attacked there. And these are the few examples, lactobacillus and all, which helps us to have this protection by that. So first, lymphoid system development or the immune system development. Second, protection against infection. The third is the structure and function of GIT itself is regulated by this friends called gut microbiome. How? So evidence of germ-free animals tells that cecum is greatly enlarged, often leading to reproductive and functional GI disorder, increased enterochromium in cell area, while the intestinal surface area is reduced, impairment in the peristaltic activity, and abnormal cholesterol and bile acid metabolism. So forget all four parts, but concept is taken that if germ-free animal models are there, their GI system is not well developed structurally and functionally. That tells again one more concept to us. They are real friends. They help us to develop our tissue. Okay. So the first year of life is damn important. Now again, peristalsis and surface maturation is by this gut bacteria, and barrier fortification, regenerative capacity is also helped by the gut microbiota. So we understood the anatomy or the composition of gut microbiota, their location, how do they survive, how do they evolve. The next part we started, the gut microbiota, how do they help us in the physiology. First was lymphoid system development, second was protection against infection, and third is this structure and function of GIT is also by our gut microbiota. Nutrition and metabolism, again the same part, that one thing you should understand is the dietary fibers. It will get converted to short chain fatty acid and butyrates, and butyrates are something very important to modulate the uptake and deposition of dietary lipids, as well as it is one thing which regulates your gut activity more towards the tolerance phenotype. So there are so many things we take in food, but when it requires to be absorbed and to go to the nutritional value, it is all by the gut microbiota. Now, this is one thing you should notice, that germ-free animals require significantly higher amount of the calorie intake to maintain same body weight compared to the specific pathogen-free animal. Means it tells if you do not have these friends in you, you have to eat a lot to meet your energy demands. So that tells indirectly that gut microbiota maximize the caloric availability, right? So that is the concept. It is helping. It helps us to develop lymphoid system. It helps us to protect against infection. It helps us to develop our GI system and function of that. Now it is helping us to take even our food inside. So they are actually real friends. Without them, life is really difficult. Outside the GI system, are they really friends? Just at the GI or somewhere else also they have influences. Okay, we know physically they stay at the GI in the lumen, but we know that everyone can influence things beyond where they stay. Okay, they also might be having Zoom meeting and all. Okay, so how they do that Zoom meeting? Okay, so that is something, the body is actually connected everywhere. It can have influences there because what is decided at the gut will be conveyed to all over body. So where does it get conveyed, and how it does get conveyed, and what are the evidences of that conveyance? So cardiovascular system indirectly influence the cardiac output and vasomotor tone of vessels. So evidence is possible seen in the germ-free animals. So your next patient tomorrow does not have BP. You tell your consultant, sir, actually this gut microbiota are less, I think. Okay, they will screw you for sure. But okay, this is the one theory to understand, that the concept will be more ahead and ahead to understand, that sometimes we think that okay, a 30-year-old age or 35-year age, no specific risk factor, and this cardiovascular disease came, or he has cardiac failure or something. So maybe it's the how he lived those 30 years, how those gut microbiota developed, how was his first year of life, that all mattered and came out. Neurological development of nervous system disease, the perception of the pain sensation, appetite regulation, and endocrine wise regulation of the threshold of the HP axis. All these are dependent on your gut microbiota. So I think what you can right now imagine is a genetic disease. A genetic disease, or I will say more specifically, a monogenic disease, which is a single gene responsible for some disease. Even if gene is same, all the individuals of that disease behave differently. Why they behave differently? Their environment is different, their gut microbiome is different, and their impact of gut microbiome to those phenotypes are different. That tells you a lot of explanation that it matters. Okay, now just I'm not going too much inside, but we can talk something. This is gene and this is environment. Environment influence the gene. So now remember one point. We cannot change genetic makeup. We can by CRISPR, but right now what we are talking for all individuals, we cannot change genetic makeup. But actually it is not genetic makeup which matters. Out of this gene, which is the copy to the cell or every cell, what is getting expressed which matters. Okay, so it is not just the information in the brain. How do you express that information which matters? Now, how do we express that depends on what is the environmental surrounding that. And that environmental decides the genetic expression. That is the concept of epigenetic. Okay, so genetic expression gets converted to real thing is the epigenetic, and that's how this genetic and microbiome or genetic and environmental interaction is required. So I think yesterday also where we discussed, and we had I think not with few people, but we had one discussion even when you saw the slide of the rheumatoid arthritis. What we saw, the disease starts in gut, the disease starts in respiratory mucosa, or disease starts in oral cavity with that Porphyromonas gingivalis. Why do the disease starts in gut, respiratory mucosa, or the oral cavity? Because these are the only site in the body where environment interacts with the human. Okay, if my environment interacts with the human, with myself, by the way I eat, by the way I breathe. That is the 2 points the environmental actually interacts with the human body. So if environment has to affect my genetic expression, it has to come into contact of my genes, and the only contact which is possible is either a gut tissue or it's a nasal or it's a respiratory tissue. So if I smoke, yeah, it matters. It is sensed by my genes and it might change the genetic expression. So this is just one concept building that okay, this is what interaction of gene and environment determines the phenotype of disease. So we always keep talking when we write in final year exam that it's the interaction of gene and environment, but our mind should be very clear where do they interact? They interact at the mucosa level. Now the question comes, do they interact at the skin because it's all exposed and environment is all surrounding me? Does it interact with the skin? Not that much, because if you can do right now, you touch your skin, you touch your mucosa. What is easy to penetrate? It's a mucosa. Skin is quite protected by the stratified layers, while mucosa is not. So any new environmental thing comes, it has to interact with your cells. It is a mucosa, not the skin. If skin is broken, yes. If there is a wound, yes. If there is infection, yes. They start interacting. Your environment talks to your skin. Okay. So this is what we were talking out of the way. But in the gut microbiota, what we discussed, what is their composition, what is their function inside the GI, outside the GI, right? This is all summary. Their maturation, GIT functional maturation, nutrition, xenobiotic metabolism, drug deposition, and behavior. Everything is taken care by the gut microbiota. Okay. So sometimes you might have seen the simple difference that I give methotrexate or you give methotrexate to so many people. Some develop nausea, vomiting, some do not develop. Why? Maybe their gut microbiota is different. The way they handle methotrexate is different. That might be the reason they develop side effect, they do not develop side effects. So xenobiotics also is dependent on that. So microbiota in disease. Okay, so I won't. Okay, this is the point we want to go. Uh, that it is attributed to so many diseases, including obesity, metabolic syndrome, atherosclerosis, diabetes mellitus. These are the interest a physician is expecting you first to answer: inflammatory bowel disease, liver disease, and emerging infectious disease. This is the total microbiota spectrum which has been attributed there. And these are something, some rheumatoid disease also can be there. And this is way I will like to divide the disorder of GIT, extra GI disorder, and role of probiotics. Okay. So if you see the disorder of GIT related to microbiota or the dysbiosis, it is IBD, GI malignancy, cholelithiasis, liver disease, and minimum hepatic encephalopathy. In extra GI disorder, arthritis, lupus, familial Mediterranean fever, allergy, type 1 diabetes, MS, obesity, autism, and role of probiotics. There are some RCTs in RA, some RCTs in IBD, or irritable bowel syndrome and psoriasis, that probiotics may be helpful to prevent that inflammatory burden of the disease. Okay, so I won't go much in detail, but I think we should go to this slide. That whatever we see here, that gut dysbiosis is actually the thing which determines the skin related disease, where these organisms are increased, these are reduced. Don't go in the names. Type 1 diabetes, these are increased, these are reduced. Lupus, these are reduced, these are increased. CNS related autoimmune disease, MS, these are increased, these are reduced. CNS cognitive disorder, few are increased, few are reduced. So what I'm talking is increase, decrease, increase, reduced. It is called dysbiosis. The imbalance of the gut microbiota composition is called dysbiosis. Now, if you remember the function of the gut microbiota, one was the lymphoid development and lymphoid maturation. Second was the protection against the infection. Third was the gut motility and nutrient absorption. So if the dysbiosis develops, all things get disturbed, and all these things which were pathogenic organisms which were kept at the gut now has entry through the gut. Now, when a pathogen enters in the gut, what happens? They are pathogen. Now, they are not friends. The pathobiont become pathogen. So, the antigenic stimulation starts. Initially, all were regulatory milieux. Now, this regulatory milieu goes to what? inflammatory milieu. And when it goes to inflammatory milieu, what happens? The autoimmune rheumatic diseases starts happening.